Marvin Harrison Jr., this photo comes out of him just looking absolutely jacked. I mean, Kyler Murray said he thought this was AI.
I got to ask Marv about his workout plan there. Got to get beach ready for the summer here. You know, I don't know if there was a day this offseason that Marvin wasn't in our building. And so it's shown. So we're excited for him to be able to take that next step. And he's really well on his way here the way he's performed this spring.
Welcome in. It is the Tuesday, June 17th edition of the NFL Spotlight Show. I am your host, Ari Meirov. It is a Tuesday. That means we have a special Spotlight guest of the week. And for the second time in a matter of weeks, we are going to have a current GM here on the show. We will be joined today by Arizona Cardinals GM Monti Ossenfort, entering his third year as general manager. Year one was 4 wins. Year two, they doubled it up to 8 wins. And this is a team that is on the rise, a team that was very active this offseason, is addressing primarily their defense and defensive line, and a team that, not many people are talking about, but Monti and his staff, they've been putting in a lot of work. And I kind of have a sneaky feeling about this team being competitive in the NFC here in 2025. We spoke for over 30 minutes about his career, his journey, and this Arizona Cardinals team. He won 4 Super Bowls in New England, so a pretty great career so far for Monti, and I don't think many fans really know much about him, and this is a great way to know a lot more about him and what he has done in Arizona so far in 3 years. So here it is, my full 30-plus minute discussion with Arizona Cardinals GM Monti Ossenfort. Joining me today here on NFL Spotlight, he is now entering his 3rd season as the general manager of the Arizona Cardinals. He won 4 Super Bowls during his time with the New England Patriots. It is Monti Ossenfort. Monti, thank you so much for doing this. How are things going?
Going well, Ari. Appreciate you taking the time to have me on, and excited to chop it up with you here a little bit.
No, absolutely. And this is the NFL Spotlight Show. We love spotlighting people in the NFL who we want to get to know more about. And I know I told you this before we started, but I feel like you might be the least known GM in the NFL. And I love what you've done so far in Arizona, rebuilding this team and the organization, how young it is, and the offseason you've had. But I feel like people should get to know you a little bit better, and the journey you've had in the NFL now that it's nearing 25 years in this league. So I want to start off with this. Like, we just had John Spytek on the show a few weeks ago, who's a close friend of yours as well. And both of you guys are scouts at heart. And that is something, it's a very big deal for both of you. I guess, when did your love for scouting, where did that come from? And when did you know that was the path you wanted to take in your life?
Yeah, Ari. I mean, I think, before we get going, I guess, being the least known, I think that's a great thing. So, unfortunately, hopefully this doesn't move me up those rankings. I kind of like being in the shadows a little bit. That's not a bad thing. But, yeah, I think really for me, it was, starting out, I played small college football. Wasn't a very good player. Team wasn't very good, but kind of had a decision to make leaving undergraduate in college, and thought about going the coaching route, but just didn't feel right that was the right fit for me. And just kind of trying to figure out life and which way it was going, and led me to a graduate school program at Ohio University. And from there, decided that football front office was where I wanted to go, wanted to stay involved in the game, wanted to stay involved with the football part of the game, and was fortunate enough to use my Ohio University education and that program to set me up and get me on the path of scouting, and got a taste of it with a couple internships early in my career, and really fell in love with it and didn't look back, and was fortunate to work with a lot of good people and a lot of good programs along the way.
Well, you ended up as an intern with the Minnesota Vikings, and then you went over the next year to the Houston Texans, and that was in '02 when they became an expansion team in the NFL. I don't know who that is. How did you end up with an expansion team? Who was the person who kind of got you into the door with them?
Yeah, I used a connection of an Ohio University grad who was working in the business office in Houston, and I reached out to him and said, hey, I want to get into personnel, I want to get into scouting. Who would the person be that I would contact? And he passed my name along to a gentleman named Rob Kissel, and Rob was a pro and college scout at the time. for the Texans, and had a couple interviews with Rob, and was fortunate enough to get that position down there. And here we are, whatever, 20 some years later, and Rob is back, and we're working together again. And so that was my to get my foot in the door, my first time with Rob and the Texans down in Houston.
That's awesome. And I know there's a few people there in your organization right now who you met along in Houston. Your assistant GM, David Steers, was also there in Houston with you. But during your time early on in your career, was there somebody who kind of had a major impact on your path, someone who kind of gave you that confidence that you really could rise up the front office ranks?
I mean, I've been fortunate really my entire career to have people to learn from, not only people that were very talented professionally, but really good people to just be around, and that took care of me along the way. And so, in Houston, the guys that you just mentioned, Rob Kissel, Dave Sears, did a great job of helping me and learn along the way. Charlie Casterly was the first GM that I worked for. Charlie's an outstanding man. He's been a great mentor through all these years. And then my formative time in New England, like, I was just surrounded by people that I could learn from just walking in the door. And so, it started with Coach Belichick, Scott Pioli, Thomas Dimitroff, Jason Light, John Robinson, just guys that were just helped me, just watching them work and watching them, how they went about their business. And Nick Caserio was also another guy who was, very influential in just my development as both a scout and just a mentor in life, really. And so I've been fortunate the entire way to have a lot of people to learn from, and really it's served me well as I've gotten to this point.
Looking back at the early portion of your career, Texans in '02, Patriots in '03, back to the Texans in '04 and '05, back to the Patriots in '06. I guess what was behind all the back and forth of those two organizations?
Yeah, no, it was kind of a yo-yo there for a while. And so, my first job with the Texans, I it was a year-long internship. And so that's the way Charlie ran his internship program. And so it was a year long. And at the end of that year, if there was a job, great. If there wasn't, they would help me find the next step. And so had a couple interviews, didn't get jobs, and was actually unemployed, and was living in my parents' basement looking for my next opportunity, and got that opportunity with the Patriots. Went to the Patriots, and was there for a year. And at the end of the year, at the end of that year, had a little bit of a decision to make. The Patriots had a job for me. The Houston Texans called back, and at that point they had a job. And so, at that point, I was at a little bit of a crossroads. And I think for me, the tipping point, there was a tall blonde girl that lived down in Houston that I was interested in. So I chased her back to Houston. Fortunate for me, she became my wife. And so, that worked out. My 2 years in Houston professionally, although a lot of growth, didn't go so well on the field. And then at the end of those 2 years, there was a regime change. And at the end of those 2 years, there was a chance to go back to the Patriots. Scott Pioli and Coach Belichick were, I was fortunate enough, they were willing to bring me back. And so went back to the Patriots at that point, and was there for, oh boy, about 15 years. We had a long run there at that point.
Well, I love that story, and it was worth it, I would say, looking back at it now. I do want to go to your time with the Patriots, and you mentioned this before, but you worked alongside so many brilliant NFL minds, future NFL GMs. From, you mentioned Pioli and Caserio, and Dave Ziegler was there, Jason Light, of course, John Robinson, Bob Quinn was there, Dimitrov was there. So many guys who ended up becoming GMs around the league. And of course, there was Bill Belichick as well, who's the greatest mind of them all. What was it like being around so many great minds like those people, and eventually seeing these guys, move up the ladder, and some of those guys become GMs while you were there?
Yeah, it was excellent. Don't forget Adam Peters, Ari. Adam and
One more.
we started as scouting assistants together. And so, it was just cool to see, like, everybody had their own style. Everybody had their own way of operating. We were all trying to our job was to serve Coach Belichick and his program, and it was his program and what he was trying to do. But the way that we got there was different, and each person operated individually, and those guys were supremely talented, highly intelligent individuals, driven, hard worker. So taking something from each one of those guys and seeing those guys go on to have success, it was cool to see. It was great to be around. It was inspirational. You always had to rise to the level of what was going on around you. And so to see all, whatever that was, 6, 7 guys go on to be able to lead different NFL franchises, that was a cool group to be a part of.
You remember the first like player that you kind of banged the table for that ended up becoming a success story? Like, is there a player that you remember from your time there in New England that I know it's a team effort and everybody gets credit for everything, but like, do you remember the player that you had that you kind of banged the table for?
Um, I don't know. I think that sometimes can be a little overblown when that happens. There is a one story that I think I've told before is that when I was a scout, when I was an area scout, you don't have as much. I was living in Colorado at the time. That's where I was based, and I was over the top of the western half of the country, and so for whatever reason, one draft cycle, I got on to doing in the lead up to the draft, the April before the draft. I had a project thrown my way from, I don't know where it originated, but I was looking at special teams players. And so, I put together some write-ups on special teams only players. And so at the top of my stack, had nothing to do with offensive or defensive players. It was just strictly based on special teams rankings. And at the top of my stack that year was a guy named Matt Slater out at UCLA. And, Matt, he had kind of bounced around. He had been a wide receiver. He had been a safety. But when you put on the special teams tape, this guy, he stood out. He was outstanding. And so, I had sent my stuff in. I believe it was Thomas. I think it was Thomas was around there at that point. And so kind of sent it in to Thomas. John Robinson was a college director, and whoever looked at it, I kind of sent it away and didn't hear anything about it. And so then one morning, I kind of woke up in bed, and the time changed from New England to Colorado, a couple hour time change there, and kind of look at my email. And, at that time I didn't really have much direct involvement with Coach Belichick. And so, look at my phone, check my email in the morning, and I got an email from Coach Belichick, and I sat up and, I was like, oh boy, I better read this one, what I do. And so, it was just Coach Belichick said, hey, thanks for putting this list together. I appreciate it. Hey, I'd like to talk to you more about Matt Slater. I said specifically, like, would you be willing to draft this guy as just a special teams player? And so I nudged my wife. I said, hey, like, look at this. I got to respond to this. And so I, composed myself, and my answer was, yes, coach, I would draft Matt Slater strictly based on his special teams ability. And so, I don't know if that's really getting up and banging the table, but I thought that was a cool moment for me in my scouting career, especially then to see what Matt has done to, arguably go on to be one of the best special teams players in the history of the NFL. I don't know if I'd say that was banging the table for him, but it was a cool moment that meant a lot to me in my career.
The Patriots used the fifth round pick on Slater, and Bill Belichick is on the record here on this 33rd team, mentioning that he had the honor of coaching the greatest offensive player ever in Tom, the greatest defensive player ever in Lawrence, and he said the greatest special teams player in Matthew Slater, and saying that he should be a Hall of Famer. So hearing the behind the scenes stories of how he ended up in New England and using a fifth round pick on somebody who's strictly a special teamer and ended up playing his entire career with that one organization, it's pretty cool to hear. And I'm sure that that has a special place in your heart there with the fact of how it all happened. And I look over the time there in New England, and you were there for a while, 2006 to 2019. You guys won 4 Super Bowls, so many great players that were there over the course of your career there. But in 2020, you made the move to become the director of player personnel for the Tennessee Titans. And of course, John Robinson was the GM. How difficult was it, I guess, to leave New England, a place you've been with for a long time, but at the same time knowing you're kind of moving up the ladder and joining somebody you know really well?
Yeah, Ari, that was a big life choice, not only for me but for my family. I mean, we loved living in New England. Our my young kids were settled at the time. My wife was happy. Uh, we were with had just the kind of the Patriot run was kind of coming to the end there, so it was a little bit of a crossroads. Um, but really, I thought for me it was time that I had to kind of get out from underneath the umbrella of the Patriots and just see a different way. And so, I was fortunate to have a great spot to go. John Robinson is a great friend. Has been a great mentor. Know his family really well, and so he's been great to me. Gave me an opportunity to come and learn and see a different way, a way of that was rooted in New England beliefs, but just maybe delivered a little bit differently. And so to be able to do that, to go to a program and to work with John and work with Coach Vrabel, just to see that, to put their spin on just the way things were done in New England. That was a very important step for me in my career. And the 3 seasons we spent there, my family loved our time in Nashville, a great city. We had a little bit of success there, and so that was a great developmental opportunity for my career.
It definitely ended up being the right move there because during your time in Tennessee, the team was one of the better teams in the AFC. And you personally helping build that roster with John and the rest of the staff, you also started getting GM interviews. And I know that you interviewed in Cleveland, Chicago, Carolina, the Giants. Tennessee interviewed you after John was surprisingly let go. I guess at one point, did you realize you had a shot at becoming an NFL GM and actually running a team at some point?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was always the hope, always the goal, and to be able to have those opportunities to interview for those jobs, it was surreal, and it was an honor just to have those opportunities, and then had a couple, one, two, three, and they didn't go my way. A couple I thought I was close on, and just couldn't quite get over the hump for whatever reason. Maybe it wasn't the right fit, it wasn't the right time, and maybe I wasn't quite ready. I don't know. They're probably a combination of all those things. And so, to have those opportunities to be in front of owners and be in front of, different organizations, that was a really cool opportunity to have. And then, ultimately to get to have this opportunity to come out here to the Valley in Arizona and lead this team, I'm where I'm supposed to be. And so it all worked out positively. But there was some tough times there when you interview for a job and you think you want it and your mind starts going down that road and does you go your way. But in the end, things have a way of working out the way they're supposed to.
Well, you end up in Arizona, like you said, January of 2023 is when Michael Bidwell, the owner, hires you. And I asked this question to John Spytek as well, but life as a GM, I know some fans might think it's like Madden building a roster, but it's way more. And I'm curious to ask you, like, how different was it? How fast was everything going? How much more was coming at you compared to the other roles? I know your family hadn't moved yet. There were so many things going on. Just how crazy was it to become a GM and see all these different things come at your desk?
Yeah, I think a lot of things happen all at once. And so, the NFL calendar doesn't slow down. The NFL doesn't care if, you're trying to hire a new coach or you're trying to get adjusted to a new job. And the NFL is like, free agency is coming, the draft is coming, OTAs are coming. It doesn't matter. And so I think being able to handle all that, it was a lot. It was a lot going on. Had to rely on a lot of people that had been here. Thankfully, there were a lot of talented people in this organization when I got here. Was able to bring on some people that I knew and trusted to kind of help me, because the job is too big for one person to handle every single aspect. You got to rely on people that are experts in their area, and thankfully I had that. And so that first cycle, got here in the middle of January. And like you said, I think it was a bit of a blessing that my family wasn't out here, that I could focus and sink in on this. It was hard. It was hard on all of us, but really allowed me to really focus completely on getting through that time period, and being what the organization needed me to be at that time. And so that was great to get through that and then get everybody settled and moved out here. And then I think what we found is that, it doesn't slow down your second and third year. It doesn't, like, and the NFL never slows down, but at least people know, hey, this time of year we do this time of year do this. You get your processes and your structures in place so that people know what to expect. That first initial 4 or 5 months, people don't know what to expect. I didn't know what to expect. And so that was the challenge of it, getting into a rhythm.
Think you were living out of David Sears' place at the beginning of your tenure there. That's how much different it is to move to a different state and get the GM job and have many things going on at the same time. But I can't talk about your first year in Arizona without mentioning the big move that you made, and it was on draft day with the Texans, where you moved up, where you moved back from 3 to 12, and then back to 6 to take Paris Johnson. I want to give a shout out to the Cardinal digital team, because the behind the scenes of the war room is some of the best access I've ever seen any team give. And I like, for you as a first time GM to A, do that move, and then B, keep it a secret the way both you and Nick did. How did that all unfold? And did you have any nerves pulling it off? Because even like the Jaguars and Browns trade this year, like it finally trickled out the day of the draft. You guys did a pretty good job of keeping that quiet all the way until you guys were on the clock.
Yeah, Ari, that was a explosive series of events there for the first draft. And it was fun. It was a lot of fun looking back on that. It's still kind of hard to believe everything fell into place like it did. But I think the key to us, for us, that draft is we had an idea of what we were trying to do. And so, we had planned out scenarios. Like, for my process, I like to be done with our board. I like to be done with our board the week prior to the draft, and I like to have it set. And so then the entire last week of the draft is just, leading up into the draft, is just planning scenarios and talking through, hey, if this happens, we can do this. If, we get this opportunity, would we take this? And so I think that this is set up ticks there from when we got on the clock at 3 until we picked it, traded our way back up into 6. We had walked through not exactly those exact scenarios, but similar scenarios to try to put ourselves in that situation. And so when they happened, we had guys in the room, namely Rob Kissel, Dave Sears, Michael, our owner, JG, our coach. Like, everybody knew that this was a possibility. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, this is happening. Should we do it? Should we not do it? Like, we knew if certain scenarios presented themselves, we were going to strike and we were going to be aggressive. And so, I think certain things happened in that draft that, if they didn't fall a certain way, then none of this would have happened. And, like, that's probably more often than not during drafts. Things don't happen, and opportunities just kind of come and go. But, hey, 5 or 6 things needed to happen for everything to fall in place, and they just so happened to do it. And, we were ready to make the moves that we thought were best for the team at the time.
Yep, and Paris Johnson has been a pretty good player for you guys so far, and of course, you got that additional first round pick as well as part of the trade. But I do want to ask you, as part of that trade, like I said, you got that Texans first round pick the next year, and I think everyone at the time was like, "This is a guaranteed top 5, top 10 pick." As you watched that next season unfold, and you saw what Houston and CJ Stroud was doing as a rookie, were you just blown away at just how good they were that fast when everybody did not really have high expectations for them?
Yeah, Ari, I don't think, really, I don't think we went into that trade saying, hey, we got to try to find a trade with this team because I think we were just trying to, with that scenario presented itself, we were trying to collect assets. And, first round draft picks are valuable no matter where they are. And so, like, sure, I would have loved, not for my boy Nick down in Houston, but I mean, I would have loved for them to have a rough year. But you know what? We didn't make that trade counting on them not having a good year. I mean, CJ had an unbelievable year. I mean, they're building a heck of a program down there, and they continue to do it. But I don't think with any trade, it's hard to predict the NFL year to year. Like, what we've seen it all the time. Teams go from last to first. And so to be able to predict like what's going to happen from one year to the next, I think it's tough. So that was not part of our consideration in making that deal.
Yeah, I mean, it was just incredible to see how well they played, and that pick ended up at 27, which I don't think anybody was expecting. But you also got a pretty good player there of Darius Robinson. But, I want to just go back to just you as a GM. We always hear about the Patriot way, and with your experience in that Patriots culture with the sustained success, How have you been able to apply some of that in Arizona, but at the same time, make sure you are authentically yourself, which I think is something some other people have had a hard time doing coming out of New England?
Yeah, and I think, I think really it's for me, the Patriot way. I know it's thrown out there a lot, and sometimes um, for those of us that were in the building, like I don't know that I think it's a hard concept for us to really understand or really to put our hands around because to me, uh, the secret sauce of the Patriot way was just an entire organization that knew what their role was that contributed to us being able to have success on Sundays. And so, there wasn't something where, we didn't have to come in and read a manifesto of, hey, this is the Patriot way or anything like that. I think really it was making sure everybody knew in each individual department how their job, how their role played a part in us being successful. And so for me, that's what I've tried to bring out here as a GM. It's that everybody's got a different job. Like the players, like catch touchdowns, throw touchdowns, sack a quarterback, and then it goes to scouts, finding players, coaches, coaching the players, trainers, getting players ready to go. The janitors, like making sure everything's clean, the kitchen staff, making sure we have good food. Like, I think all that is, making sure everybody knows how their each respective role factors in and why it's important. And if you can get good people performing consistently at a high level, then that's when you have a chance to succeed. And to me, that's what the Patriot way means to me. And so, and I think for the other part, I think for me, it's just important to be myself. And so, I think I'm going to empower people to do what they're doing, and that's how the Patriot building was ran a certain way, and our building runs a certain way. And I don't think that's something that you can duplicate, nor do you want to duplicate. I think it's got to be true to the people that are in a building and making sure that they have the tools they need to be successful, and then getting the right people in place and not looking back.
Yep, and that so far has been the case there in Arizona with you being the GM and everybody else underneath you. I want to ask you about this current Cardinals team that you've constructed so far. I'm going to start with your first round pick last year, Marvin Harrison Jr. This photo comes out of him just looking absolutely jacked. I mean, Kyler Murray said he thought this was AI. What are you expecting from Marvin in year two, who quite clearly has been putting in a lot of work?
Yeah, I don't know. I gotta ask Marv about his workout plan there, huh? I gotta get beach ready for the summer here. I'm behind. No, I mean Marvin. Listen, Marvin has been everything we wanted him to be. Like we knew. Um, Again, we try to do as much research as we can on players and understand what we're getting. Or Marvin has exceeded our expectations about what he is in terms of work ethic, preparation, how seriously he takes his job. And so, I don't know if there was a day this offseason that Marvin wasn't in our building, training, just working, just getting better. And so it's shown, it's showing in his body, it's showing on how he's performed out here in the spring. And we talk about it all the time, that jump from the jump that a player makes from their rookie year to their second year. That rookie year is tough. It's tough on these guys, and it's tough. It's a lot of new stuff thrown at them. And so, we're expecting the same from Marvin. And so, he had a good rookie year. He had a really good rookie year. He led our team in touchdowns. He made explosive plays, so we're excited for him to be able to take that next step. And he's really well on his way here, the way he's performed this spring.
The other thing you did this offseason was this felt like a defensive transforming offseason for you guys with Josh Sweat, Dalvin Tomlinson, Calais Campbell, drafting Walter Nolan, along with the rest of the defensive line that's been there with Darius Robinson, BJ Ojolari, Baron Browning. It feels like in a snap of a finger, this defensive front has become one of the best on paper in the league. What was the vision behind these moves? I think bringing back Calais, who truly belongs in Arizona and might be one of the best people in this league, will go a long way for some of the young guys. Just the overall identity of this defense and adding all those guys. What was the thought process, and what are you expecting out of all that?
Yeah, Ari. I mean, I think the last couple of years. I mean, we've seen like the NFL season is long. It's tough. It's tough to get through, and so we've had some attrition the last 2 years, specifically on the defensive line. So last year we made some free agent additions, and a month into the season, like guys get hurt, and guys that we had planned, that to be out there and to be contributing, they aren't out, not through no fault of their own. I mean, injuries are one of the worst parts of the NFL, and unfortunately, it struck us at that position. And so, going into this offseason, I think it was we had a couple goals. Like one was increase the depth because you can never have enough big guys, whether it's on the offensive line or the defensive line. So increase the depth. And then also on top of that is we wanted to raise the talent level in that room. And so we wanted to become more disruptive. We wanted to become more physical. We wanted to be able to create negative plays, help our back end of our defense create turnovers. And so, we wanted to focus on that. And so when we started adding pieces to the defensive front, opportunities presented themselves. And so we were able to make some additions there in free agency, and Josh Sweat, Dalvin, Calais. So we're excited about the veteran presence that they're going to bring to that room, and also the disruptive element that they've proven that they have in the league. And then, to be able to continue to add in the draft with Walter, and then Jordan Birch in the third round, we can never have enough of those guys. And so I think our ability to continue to add depth and add competition, was something that we set out to do this offseason.
Well, listeners of this show could attest to this, but last year the Cardinals were my pick for the surprise team of the year. And at one point, you guys were 6-4 and in first place in the NFC West, and I was looking pretty good. Obviously, did not finish the way you guys wanted, but it definitely feels like this is a team that's on the rise. And I want to ask you just these last two things before I wrap it up. Do you ever just reflect back on where the organization was when you got here and where it is now? Like, I remember that first year where Kyler was recovering from the ACL. You guys cut 3 out of the 4 quarterbacks who were there in training camp. You trade for Josh Dobbs. JG is not announcing who's going to be the week 1 starting quarterback. And now here we are. This is a team that won 8 games last year, doubled their win total. And I think fans are coming across as this is a team that could definitely be moving on the up of here. Do you ever look back at just this journey so far in 3 years?
I think in different ways, Ari, but I think our focus is really on what's in front of us. I think we've had, we made a lot of improvements going into our third year. We made improvements. We still have a long way to go. We made some strides last year. We fell short of where we wanted to go there. We had, the last handful of games there, we had 3 one-score games, came down to the last possession. We got to find a way to get over the hump. We got to find a way to improve that. And honestly, like what happened last year, it really has no bearing on what's going to happen this year. We got to reestablish our team. We got a lot of new players. We got guys that are going to be in different roles. We got guys that have been going to have to reestablish what they mean to this team. And so, I think the NFL it's too rapid moving of a system to get caught up in looking back and say, well, this is where we come from. Now I do think there is a lot of value in looking back and saying, hey, like we made this decision. Was this the right one? Or, hey, we could have done this differently, because I think you learn from that. I think you learn from every decision that you make or you don't make. So I think in that respect, yeah, we have looked back on some things. But really in terms of, hey, where we're going is our eyes are focused on forward and seeing what we can do for the 2025 season.
Well, I'm excited to see how it all goes. And I can't let you go without asking the question I ask every single guest. This is the NFL Spotlight Show. We put a spotlight on people in the NFL who deserve a little bit more attention. And you could pick a player, a coach, an executive, anybody really in the NFL. Who is somebody, Monty, who you think should be in this seat in the future?
Oh, Ari, I mean, let's see. I'm going to go back to, a couple guys that are good friends of mine. I don't know, maybe you've talked to them, maybe you haven't. If you have, get them on again. I think you should get Nick Caserio or Adam Peters on here. Both good friends of mine, both really doing a heck of a job leading their programs. And, they're both really good at their jobs, and they're both really good people. And so I'm going to put the spotlight on them and see what we can get out of them.
We're going to get to work on it. 2 guys who had the number 2 overall pick and picked quarterbacks and changed the direction of their franchise for years to come. Guys you've worked with, and we're going to get to work on that. But Monty, I want to thank you for coming on, talking about your career, the journey, the path it's taking you, and all the work you're doing in Arizona. Best of luck this upcoming season. I have a good feeling about this team and organization, and we're all excited to see how the Cardinals continue to build and compete.
Thanks, Ari. I appreciate the time.
Special thanks to Arizona Cardinals GM Monti Ossenfort for being our spotlight guest of the week. A really, really fun conversation there with another current GM here on the show, and a GM who I mean, I've been keeping a very close eye on the Cardinals ever since he got there, since that first blockbuster trade that he made in his first year as a GM, realizing the situation he was in with the team, where the team was at. It makes more sense to trade back, get more assets. Like, he knows exactly where the team is, where they have to improve, that it's not going to be flipped in 1 year. And you're kind of seeing everything improve year over year. And that's why, I mean, last year, like I told him in the interview, I kind of had some high hopes that this could be a surprise team in the NFL. They definitely showed that throughout the course of the year. Had some really tough one-score losses at the end of the season, but winning 8 games, being in first place in that division at one point when nobody thought it was possible at the start of the year, you see this team is improving and growing and is younger. And they finally made those big improvements this offseason, deciding to be very aggressive. That's why I'm kind of excited about the Cardinals and what they've done over here so far this offseason and what to expect over here in 2025. They will definitely be a team to watch. We will definitely talk more about them here later in the offseason once we go through every single team here on NFL Spotlight. But that will do it here for our Tuesday, June 17 edition of the NFL Spotlight Show. We will be back here tomorrow morning to talk about more things happening around the NFL. As we know, all teams, front offices, coaches, they're all away, but NFL Spotlight will continue to roll on. So we will see you all here tomorrow morning.